Welcome to this episode of the AtariCade 5200 YouTube show. Today we're going to be taking a look at Berzerk. Originally released by Stern Electronics back in the early 80s, it was programmed by Alan McNeil. Ported to a whole lot of consoles, but we're just going to concentrate on the Atari 5200 port. I've got the whole Atari 5200 super community crew here. We have Mr. Rick Reynolds from the Intellivisionaries.
Hello.
Have Mighty Matt D, our resident journalist.
Hey, everybody.
And we have Michael D'Angelo, which I haven't figured out what he does yet.
How you guys doing?
So, let's get started by talking about the arcade version of Berzerk. So we're going to start with Matt. Where did you first play Berzerk, and what are your thoughts on the arcade?
Well, I don't really remember playing it very much as a kid because I think when it came out, I would have only been about 6. So it might have been maybe faded away from popularity by the time I was running around arcades. But I do remember playing the 2600 version quite a bit. I think that was one of those games that like every 2600 owner had because it's a good board.
Oh yeah.
And playing the arcade game now, I can definitely see that there's a pretty big difference between the two, and I do like the arcade game quite a bit. It's more intense, more exciting. There's a lot more to watch out for, and I think the 5200 version does a great job of getting really close to that. So I've gotten hooked on the 5200 version because I think it's all the advancements from the 2600 version make it a really great one to pick up and play whenever. It's always a little bit different because of the random mazes. It doesn't take all that long to play, so it's not something that you have to have a lot of time for. The game wipes you out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it features the voice in the arcade game, which I just love. I know it's a bit of a gimmick, but it adds something to it for me. I love that it taunts you with that chicken fight like a robot. You get the humanoid and all that. That's just great stuff.
Coin detected in pocket. Oh, I love that one.
Oh, yeah. It's classic.
How about you, Michael?
So, first time I played this was in 1981, and it was in a backroom arcade at a video store. And I don't know how we knew this backroom arcade was there, because at that time I didn't even have a VCR. So we weren't renting videotapes at that time. So, but I remember it distinctly. There was Berzerk, Crazy Climber, and Crazy Kong, which was a Donkey Kong ripoff. Oh. I remember those 3 arcade games, and I actually like Crazy Kong. But I remember playing Berzerk, and I just loved this game. And it was simple to pick up, but very frustrating to master. And again, as Matt said about the voices, it was gimmicky, but I loved it, and it really adds to the game. And it was one of those things back then in 1981, that you didn't. I think this was one of the first games that actually had that, the voice synthesis. So the fact that they were able to do that on the 5200 just blew me away.
Oh yeah.
And I think it was one of the few. I think the only other game that had voice on the 5200 was Real Sports Baseball, if I'm not mistaken. But they did a great job on this. They did a great job porting it. And I go back to the arcade version and play the 5200 version, and there's differences, but they did such a great job on the 5200. I mean, it really shows off the power of this system.
Yes, it does.
How about you, Mr. Rick?
Yeah, my memories of the early video game stuff kind of all meshed together, blur. And in other news, I'm pretty old. So anyway, but I do remember there being arcades at like a couple local malls, and then there was a pizza place we used to go to, and then I do have a lot of memories of a Showbiz Pizza that was local here. So I'm not sure where Berzerk fit into all that mess, but I do remember seeing it and playing it some in the arcades, and then like was mentioned earlier, I think the kids up the street must have had it for their Atari 2600, which is a pretty good port of the arcade. And yeah, it's already been said, but the voice in the arcade was such a cool thing. Like at that time, there just weren't many games that talked to you at all, and so this being one of those was really cool. It kind of made it stand out. And Willie, you mentioned the coin detected in pocket as part of the attraction mode, right? I mean, that was just really really innovative and cool at the time. So it's definitely one of those classic, harkens as a classic of the era. And so, I like I say, I do remember playing it some, but it was not one of my go-to games, so I don't have real sharp memories of it, I guess.
Oh. Yeah, I really liked the arcade version of Berzerk. I played it quite often back when it first came out, when I hung out at the arcades as my parents were shopping in the mall. And one of the things that really drew me to the game was the challenge of all the different, trying to get through all the levels and shooting the robots. Of course, I thought its speaking was really, really awesome.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that about the speaking that made me kind of chuckle at this one, the 5200 port. I'm so used to hearing, and maybe this says something about my musical taste, but the arcade and the Video Victims album that has all those. I think it's that one. Is that the one that has the? That one has the Frenzy song. I guess Going Berserk is on Buckner and Garcia, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
So that one has the line in it, chicken fight like a robot, right?
Yep.
And then when I hear it on the 5200, they say fight like a robot. It's got it, and it just rings in my ear because it's fight like a robot is what it ought to sound like, and they're like fight like a robot.
They did that just to mess with you.
I guess so. Every time I hear it, I'm like, that's not right. But
That's not right. So I know it was very expensive to put that digitized piece on the arcade game. That's why I didn't have that much. I don't remember what the exact cost was, but I know it was very expensive.
I was actually just researching that because I was going to do a write-up on the game, and it said, the article I read said it cost about $1,000 a word for them to develop that.
Yep.
And it has a vocabulary of about 30 words. So think about spending $30,000 in 1980. That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
But I think it paid off for them, because I don't know what kid could walk by a machine that said coin detected in pocket and not want to play it.
Yeah.
That
was the big draw for me.
It was a big draw, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So now let's talk about the 5200 port itself. We'll start with you, Matt. Talk about what your experience is with the game, how it worked with the controllers that you tried to use it with, and what your high score was.
Well, I didn't play the 5200 version until I got a 5200 couple of years ago, but I absolutely have gotten hooked on it. It's one of my go-tos for sure. To just, if I'm going to sit and play 5200, I don't have a specific plan in mind. That's in the stack of games that I keep next to the machine. I think they did a great job on it. Having all the extra robots on the screen, like I find myself comparing it mostly to the 2600 version, because that's what I played so much when I was a kid, and it's just so much more. The higher resolution lets you have more robots on screen and more walls in the maze, just more of everything. And one thing I always notice about the 2600 version is the robots won't stand next to each other. I think maybe the programmer didn't want them on the same scan line, avoid flicker, something like that, maybe.
Oh.
And that's not an issue in 5200. So it totally changes the way you play it, like your strategy for it. And the robots can shoot diagonally at you in the 5200 version. And I don't think they can in the 2600 version.
No, they can't.
All that really threw me for a loop when I started playing it. None of my old tricks worked anymore. But I love it. And now I've gotten used to that extra challenge. And I managed to rack up a score of 8,240.
Oh, jeez, I hate you. Jamie Christmas.
And I don't think it's that bad with the CX52, but this is one where you're going to be helped out a little bit if you've got a Master Play adapters or a clone.
Yeah, those adapters that AtariCade 1021 makes are really nice. How about you, Michael?
So I've had this since I had the Atari 5200 back in 1988, and ever since. I mean, I had Berserk for the 2600 originally, which wasn't, well, everybody knows it was an awesome port. And with the 5200, once I had the 5200, I stopped playing the Atari 2600 version because this one just blows it away. I used both the stock controller, which wasn't horrible, but I also played mostly with the Master Play and an Epix 500 XJ joystick, and I did so much better once I plugged that in. My score wasn't nearly as high as Matt's, but I think I had 4180.
Oh.
And I find it funny in the manual that they say that if you score up to 999,990 points, the score will roll over. It's like,
Oh, so you just say you rolled the score. There we go.
yeah.
You hate Matt
Who's
too,
getting
buddy.
that? I mean, I couldn't even break 5,000, and you need 5,000 just to get an extra life.
Yes.
So this is a very hard game.
Yes.
And
Right.
Well, it's
I one thing about the 2600 versus the 5200, and I think even the arcade, I find on the 5200 that your player is a little slow compared to the arcade and 2600 version.
yes.
And I
Yes.
had a heck of a time escaping those diagonal shots.
Or escaping Evil Otto.
Oh yeah, Evil Auto, forget it. But I mean, and I think once it gets to like level 3, level 4, I had a really difficult time. And I don't know if you guys tried this, selecting a different level, the starting level.
Yes, I had.
I started on level 11.
Yes.
Oh, my.
I think I moved about 3 or 4 inches the whole game.
Yeah.
You got shot up right away.
Oh yeah, it's a
But-
rogue apocalypse.
This is a great game if you have a couple of minutes, to spare. Yeah, I mean, again, a game I don't think lasted me more than 5 minutes, and definitely it's a go-to game on the 5200.
Yeah, it's definitely shows what the 5200 was meant to be, a personal arcade machine. I mean, it's as close as you get to the arcade Berserk on a home console of that time. Pretty awesome. How about you, Mr. Rick?
Yeah, so I'm the newbie. I didn't have a 5200 back in the day, so it's only in my recent collecting that I've had a 5200 and played this a little bit, just very recently. Played it some with the 5200 controller. It controls fine. I didn't have a real problem with that. It felt a little mushy, but definitely okay. It wasn't like a problem like some. Like I can't play Pac-Man on the 5200 with that controller, right? So
Yeah.
it's not that kind of experience. It does a better job than something like that. But it definitely works well with a digital Master Play clone or something like that. And so I did have a weird situation with my controller. I've posted some pictures on the Facebook of a arcade controller I made. It's just a stick and some buttons, and it's in a casing. And I wired it up internally so that it'll be it presents itself basically the same wiring as an Atari 7800 controller, or I can throw a set of switches, and turn it more or less into a Sega Genesis style controller. Either way, I have been playing it in the 7800 mode for several games on the 5200, and not really had a problem until this game. If you plug a 7800 controller into a Master Play clone type of thing to use as a digital, you can't move. Like, when you try to move around, it just fires. So it's basically as if you're holding down the fire button. So you just kind of lean the stick, and you just stand still, firing in all 8 directions as robots come closer and closer. So that turned out to be an issue. And at first I thought, what happened to my stick? What happened? I broke this thing. But comparing it with other things and verifying that it wasn't a problem with the system or whatever, I eventually came around to, the 7800 controller, the buttons are wired differently than a 2600 controller. And for whatever reason, this game is not happy with the way the Master Play is presenting that. But the good news is if I use a Sega controller, which again my stick can switch over to that, then it works fine. You have to use button 2, but to fire. So I was able to actually play with it, and it was a pretty good experience. But this is the first game I've had like that the wiring of the 7800, the way it does the firing buttons, was different enough that it caused a problem with gameplay. But it was interesting. But yeah, so this game is, I think it was already mentioned, this is a tough game, and I am not good at this game, both in any form. On the arcade, I probably can hold my own to some degree in the 2600 version, but I haven't played it a ton to know. But this game really is tough. And in general, this is a kind of game that, like I said, I'm not good at it, and I want to strafe. Like, I don't like having to run at the guy I'm shooting at, right? I want to strafe instead and be able to shoot independently of my direction. And I don't know, there's something weird in my brain. If a guy is shooting at me diagonally, I run away from him on the diagonal, like it's like on the side. Like, I can't get myself to not think that way. I'm always getting killed on the diagonal shots. But yeah, so and was mentioned earlier, it's a great version of this game. It's definitely good for quick. It's going to be a quick game for me for sure. But it's good for this time in my life. I don't have hours and hours to spend on video games in the evening, so something like this is a good pick up and go. My best score playing on it was about 2,760. I was glad to break 1,000, quite frankly. So.
Well, at least I did better than you. I did 3,100 and some odd points.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I really enjoy this version of Berzerk on the Atari 5200. Like Matt was saying, I had this game for my 2600. Played the living daylights out of it. It's one of my favorite arcade ports on the 2600 as well. And when I got a hold of 5200 just a few years ago, like you, Rick, I didn't have one back then. Berzerk was one of the first games I bought because I wanted to see what it was like playing on the 5200. And I was actually pretty impressed of how it worked. Now, I tried using the stock controller, and I didn't do too well with the stock CX52 controller. So I used my Master Play clone, and I used my Epix 500XJ, like Michael did. Now, I don't know about yours, Michael, but mine has a auto fire button on it, a little switch you can flip.
No, not on mine.
And mine has an auto fire for repeat
Nice.
fire. And I had it switched for repeat fire because I was using it on my 2600 for like Space Invaders earlier that day. And I was freaking out. I thought something happened to my 5200 because I go to fire and my little guy would do like a little jig across the screen as he's firing his gun. It was pretty bizarre to see. I was like, what's going on with my crazy console? So I realized I had the switch flipped. But after I did that, I must have played a half a dozen games before I got the high score I did. I just could not get past 5,000 points, mainly because of the diagonal shots. Those kept killing me. Because, like I said, I was so used playing it on the 2600, I would try some of the tricks I do on there on a 5200, and those little robots were not going to have any part of it.
No.
They're going to take you out. Now, I did do better playing a game using my Suncom Slick Stick for some reason than I did with my Epix 500XJ. I don't know why. I seem to play a little bit easier with that Slick Stick. One of the things I like to try to do is try different controllers I have on the different games to see how well they respond. I also have one of those CommonVid Zircon controllers, look like the Fairchild Channel F controller that plugs into the Ataris. I tried it with that. Forget that. That don't work very well for me at all. And I tried my high score HS20 joystick, which is a beast in itself. Didn't do too well with that one either. So my favorite controller to use was the Suncom Slick Stick. I did the best with that one.
Those are pretty good controllers. I always like those, and I've been looking for one for my 2600.
Yeah, they're
pretty
really
good.
nice. They're really great for maze games. Really good for like Pac-Man, Junior Pac-Man, all those. Really great for that. So that was Berzerk. We did get one person that sent in feedback for this video. This is a new thing, so I didn't expect to get a whole lot right off the bat. But Brian Cesarzek wrote in, "It's such a tough game, especially with the stock controllers. I find it slightly easier with the Slick Stick, yes, and the Master Play, but still very difficult. But one of my all-time favorites." And yep, just like me, he uses the Slick Stick, so hey, points there. That's awesome.
Nice.
Now, the next game we're going to discuss on the next episode of AtariCade 5200 is going to be the arcade classic Wizard of War. So if you would like to send in some feedback to be read on the video for that one, you can send it to arcadeusa76@gmail.com. I want to thank all you guys for joining in on the show, and make sure you play Wizard of War and get some high scores. I'll be checking them.
All right.
All right, guys.